I'm here to bring joy back into people's life. And not in the cheesy, well, it is probably cheesy, but it's teaching people how to learn how to take a step back, do a full inventory of their life, act like Columbo and investigate and figure things out, figure out what your purpose is, and then really replan, reprioritize, and embrace the joy on the journey.
On cam ready in 3, 2, 1.
This is Unknown to Known, an on-cam ready presentation. I'm Jamie Maglietta. If you're liking the way this episode is going, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel or follow us on your podcasting platform of choice. On the show, I'm always highlighting experts that are on that journey from unknown to known. And today's guest is just starting out with her own podcast. It's debuting this week. Joining us today is Joy St. John. Joy, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Jamie, for having me. I'm super excited. This is my first official podcast that I'm being on as Joy St. John, not as my prior life.
And that's why I thought this would be really fun. So a little backstory, guys. There's a video on my YouTube channel about the behind the scenes of putting together the Joyous Edge. We shot at a studio in Atlanta called Skewed Orbit, so you can get a look at the space. We're there now. And while we were recording and I'm making this YouTube video, I was like, wait, you'd be a great guest because you're at the beginning.
Yes.
So what made you decide I need a podcast?
So it's funny because if I take a step back, that's my whole thing. You got to take a step back and reset, right? I have always been a champion for the underdog, and I've always wanted to share everything, share insights and leadership with anybody I could. And so that's part of how I started my own company. Was I wanted to create the Joyous Edge to be able to give executives that edge up that not everybody knows, and maybe executives that aren't typically groomed in the typical path. I wanted to give that opportunity to them to say, hey, you know what? Here's what helped these executives get to where they're at. Here's what helped them get to this. And we all go through the same things. We all deal with health issues. We all deal with stress, and we all deal with it similar ways. So it was creating an online community for people to feel known and
seen.
And seen.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Sorry, Alex. I think I got that fly in my throat. No,
I missed it. Was not the fly, I promise.
So what defines joy? As you're interviewing all these people, was there a common thread?
So I think to me, there is. And it's funny because a lot of people think, oh, joy's when you're happy, when you're this, when you're that. When I think about joy, it's almost like being in the present, in the now, and taking that step back and being able to take in the whole big picture and see what the end goal is, being able to live your purpose, live your life's purpose. And so when I think about helping clients, especially in corporations, I help them taking that step back when they're heads down in risk and just dealing with regulatory remediation, dealing with, citation after citation. It's very easy to get overwhelmed and be like, oh my God, what am I going to do? How do I handle all this? I can't do anything right. And just get all this negativity in your head. So if you think about it, anxiety is the future and depression is the past. Joy is the middle. Ooh. Joy is when you're sitting there in the moment and just being.
Oh, I love that. I talk about how I dipped to black.
Right.
And we talk about this a little bit on your podcast.
Yes.
And the dip to black really is that messy middle.
Right.
And in my framework, Known, I say own your story because the vulnerability that you share now could be the value add later. And essentially, you're empowering people to embrace that part of them and say, this brings me joy. Okay, well, how do you incorporate it when you're feeling low? When you're feeling high, how do you embrace it and protect it is something you constantly ask too.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great question. So what I find, and it's funny because when I look at my career and my life, it was like I chased first I have to get my bachelor's, and then I need to hit 6 figures, and then I need to get an MBA, and then I need to hit 250, and then I need to hit 350 and keep going, right? And so for me, it was always a monetary incentive, but it was so that I could provide for my family. And so one of the things that I learned to do and that I realized COVID really kind of happened is when I realized it, I just had like an epiphany of like, what am I working for? Why am I grinding out? I have no problem being, I had a boss once say, I need someone that can be like a bulldog or a bull in a china shop and just get things done. I'm like, I'm your girl. I can get stuff done, right? I may not care about the aftermath, but I can get it done. Obviously, as a leader in over 20 years in leadership, I've learned to adjust, and I call it bobbing and weaving with, I love boxing and kickboxing. So that's why I use that reference. But you learn those skills to be able to adapt and adjust and work the room a little bit.
Yeah, work in the room. And, as women who have basically had our entire careers in corporate America, mine being on the corporate media side, yours being at KPMG, we have that similarity where you're always trying to hustle and get ahead and to that next level, that next rung.
Right.
Before children, like I
Right.
know you have talked about
Yeah.
this where you don't have children.
No.
I do have children.
Right.
Finding that joy for me changed when I had kids.
Right.
Before, joy was being able to go out in the field and cover breaking news.
Right.
I remember when the plane landed on the Hudson and I was, in the studio and they're like, hey, can you go help this reporter as we're trying to break the news about this plane going down in the Hudson? I was so happy. Like, not happy for the moment. I feel bad about the breaking news, but that's what would bring me joy. Like that adrenaline rush of like, I'm going to help document and bring the news to people and report on this story. My career was so joy-filling that even singing, which was joyful for me before, took a back seat.
Right.
But once I had kids, I feel like that changed for me.
Yeah.
And I wanted to have you on because so many people I talk to or potentially are listening are trying to figure out, well, how do I start embracing the new me after a pivot? Or I want to do something different. I want to write a book. I want to start a YouTube channel. I want a podcast, but I don't know how to be that person after having so many years as this other individual.
Right.
It's almost like you are reborn.
Right.
And I wanted you to give some of that advice even for people. And what made you decide I had to have a podcast? Now, I know you had one before, but the audience doesn't. So tell them a little bit about that.
Right. So for me, the thing that I realized, or the moment I realized I needed to have a podcast was I'd started working with this group, the Brand Builders Group, and we were working on my brand DNA and figuring out what is it that you want to be known for, who's your avatar and all of that. And I just knew I wanted to help people when I first started out. I'm like, I felt called, to me, I'm very spiritual. I felt called by God to be out there and just share a message. And I'm like, okay, God, I don't know what that message is, but let's figure it out, right? And so for me, having led the podcast at KPMG for the Women of Risk and Cyber community, we'd have over 2,000 listeners every month when we had the podcast going. And that filled my cup, not just because I was it wasn't because I was leading a podcast. It was because I was able to share these women's story about leadership, and I was able to help work with the team to come up with the questions to ask the right thing. And I'd find out from the team members that were leading, the behind the scenes, because I was pretty much showing up, but I would work with the team to get the right questions to ask these executives in corporate America what it was from a leadership perspective. It was either on health or wellness. We'd do reflection, but we'd also do, giving feedback and things like that. And so I felt like a piece of me was missing without having the podcast. And I can tell you, everybody has said the podcast comes later. But for me, the reason why I felt the podcast came first was because it gave me my repetitions. It gave me my purpose. And I was like, I don't care if I'm making, of course, I'd love to make money through podcasts. Don't get me wrong there.
We all do.
Yes. But I just want to get the message out. And it's not just my message, it's everybody else's message. And it's funny because as we've been working on this, everybody's like, well, what's your message? I'm like, well, no, it's not my message. It's the guest's message. I want to share the guest's message. And so getting that transformation. And actually, even with you coming to say, hey, Joy, we're going to put you in the seat. I'm like, wait, but that's my seat. I want to sit on that side.
Yeah,
like,
for the podcast, she
yes,
sits here in the
yes.
ones we've recorded here.
Exactly. And I'm like, I can't look. I keep looking to that camera because I'm like, that's my camera. So it's
I
interesting.
figured I'd give her a challenge.
She did. She definitely pushed my comfort zone. So,
I'm going to take a quick break. And after this break, I'm going to ask you some tips that you can provide people for podcasting that want to get started. If you're looking to start building out your personal brand, knowing your message is the first step to my known framework. And I highly recommend Brand Builders. I have an affiliate link in the description, and that does help support this podcast. So do check it out. I also use Riverside, and we've hosted Riverside FM events here at Skewed Orbit. I am an affiliate, so use that link for that. And if you're looking to become a client of mine, I do have a visibility program. You need that personal branding before you come to me. So again, Brand Builders. But the podcasting online, definitely Riverside. Joy, what about some of the podcasting tips? Like, what have you learned through this process? Because now we've recorded, 40 episodes?
41 at least. Yeah, I know. It's crazy. So between here and Nashville Creative Spaces and Brand Builders Group, we definitely have filmed 41 episodes. So it's been about a 50-50 split. So ultimately, what have I learned? There has been a lot. Part of it is, you have to have your avatar. You do have to have your person that you're speaking to. And so if you start a podcast just to get your own ego out there, it's not necessarily going to work. I mean, maybe it does. Maybe there are people out there that it works for, but I didn't want to be, I had to think about what was the purpose behind it. To me, having said I'm very spiritual, it was, I want to be able to share leadership traits and share how to be a servant leader with the world and share God's message from that. And so for me, that was my message, but maybe somebody else has one as a single parent or as a newcomer. I don't know. There's so many different things and so many different podcasts that are out there. And actually right now, I think is a time that many people are creating podcasts. So just get your topic. I would say use AI. AI has been one of my best friends in this process because when I'm feeling a brain fog or I'm feeling stuck, I could just be like, hey, Claude, I'm really struggling. What should I do? Can you give me some ideas on 30 days of content for the Joyous Edge? Or can you give me ideas on this? Now, I'm not saying take it verbatim. They helped me with some of my first scripts that I was coming up with, and they'd help me with some of my key talking points. I'd plug in the links and say, here's the references to this speaker that's coming on. Can you pull together some key points? It was great because I used to have, when I was at KPMG, I'd have associates be able to pull that stuff for me, but not having that, I was able to, do it on my own and pull together those facts and those tips and tricks. We're still working on the release schedule and how do we release 5 episodes, 10? I think there's lots of different debates there. So you will see on August 3rd when I eventually release that. But the main thing is get your ideas together. Just start coming up with stories. Everything can be content. I am such a relator and a collaborator that for me, part of my podcast is sharing. Well, a big part of the podcast is not only giving the insights into the listeners, but being able to give my guests an opportunity to share their story.
Yeah.
And there's different ways to do it. You can do it solo, right? You could do it with a guest or you could have co-hosts. I think I've seen that too.
Yes.
And so it just depending on the type that you want. For me, I wanted to do the guest mainly because I was scared to do it on my own. Like I couldn't imagine just sitting in front of the screen and saying, hey, I'm Joy St. John. This is the Joyous Edge. And here's what you're going to learn today. And so I borrowed my confidence from my guests on the first few episodes. And I interviewed friends. I interviewed friends of friends. And then, working with you, we got a couple of other people that I didn't know yet. And it's been great because I'm making connections. So the thing that I love about doing a podcast with guests is the connections that you make. I'm a huge networker and all about, okay, I know this person needs, realtor. Let me get you connected over here.
Yes.
We're going to do that connection, and so one of the things that I will do is always try to think about how I can relate to my guests and how I can be of service to them. And so I think the key thing of being a podcast host is being not just a leader for your guests, I mean, for your viewers. I keep doing that. Not only being a leader and educational for your viewers, but also being a leader and educational for your host and being, for your guests, so that you can share with them, collaborate and help lift them up.
Yeah. And I want to give some more podcast tips. But first, I want to bring up a few points that you made. Guys, again, remember the Joyous Edge podcast. It will be on YouTube as well as on your podcast platform of choice. So be sure to find it. You can also find Joy on social media. So there'll be links in the description, as I mentioned. You talked about YouTube. On the Unknown to Known podcast, I have a library of resources, a YouTube insider who he and I consult on YouTube with our clients. There is so much information in that episode with John. And I also have on, for anyone listening who's trying to figure out how to build that story, how to build the show, Allison Hare. That's another episode on Unknown to Known where we walk you through how you can start turning your idea into a show. And I think it's really important that a lot of people think it through. I used to have this roadmap to podcasting, and a lot of it was, you really want to look at what's already out there. How can you be different? What can you offer your audience and sustain? Because what people are seeing in the podcasting space is that not many people can last beyond a certain amount of episodes. Now, it used to be 8. I think it's now around 10. But you've already got 41, so you're in the camp.
We're going.
And I think, what we're also seeing is the push for video. One of your guests had arrived and they didn't expect it on camera. And I'm like, I think, that's an obvious at this point. We're in an on-camera studio.
Right.
What individuals need to think about and really stop asking the question, I think. It's like, if you are audio or video, you're both. If you are leaning into a podcast, you're both. And here's why. Social media content, YouTube. YouTube is the most watched streaming platform in U.S. households. You should be there. And your thumbnails and your tiles, they need to resonate with that audience, as well as your social media clips, because if not, you won't get the engagement.
Right.
Building a YouTube channel is really, really hard. I've been at it for a few years, not many followers. Rory Vaden on his podcast for brand builders, he talked to, I think it was the CEO of Think Media, and they talk about YouTube and the strategies that can be put in place. There's a lot of resources out there for anyone listening, and I think our preferred, recommendations can really help you get a good start. But when you're talking about, I needed to do this podcast before essentially really building the business, I find fascinating. And I think it is really important to emphasize this. On the journey from unknown to known, you're essentially going from someone who was behind the scenes, not really on camera. I'm assuming your podcast was audio only.
No, it was
video.
A webinar. Yeah.
Okay, great. So that's great. So you had this video where you were on camera already, but now you're trying to become known in a new space, in a new way.
Right.
So I can now see the reasoning for being on camera on a podcast to launch everything, because now you're trying to build your authority in a new way.
Right.
But as you've been doing it, do you feel more confident now in the business you're building because you've been having these conversations?
Well,
I'm curious.
I just want to say, I want to make a minor adjustment.
Yeah.
So I would say part of launching the podcast, I did have to build the business and the framework first. You're right. I am starting a new company, but I had the framework there.
So it's in.
Yeah. So my framework is set. I've got, I am working through that. What I will say is, where I borrowed the confidence was a mentor of mine said to me, he's like, you've got over 25 years in risk and compliance, and you know how to solve problems there. You know how to execute there. So for me, my whole framework is, take a step back, investigate, be Columbo, and find your joy, right? And so what he did was take that risk and compliance knowledge, or he helped me, was take that risk and compliance knowledge and link it to my leadership approach. And so it's really, a lot of what I do is I still do risk and compliance advisory, but I'm really coaching a lot of executives in that risk and compliance space as well as other spaces because it's transferable skills, right? Leadership can be it's definitely learned, but it's something that, being a servant leader, how to lift your team up. I always say you train up to train out, and I want to empower my teams versus like micromanage them so that they can get stuff done and learn and push their comfort zone in a safe space. That's one of the key things about leadership is being able to grow a team while pushing them to push their comfort zone. And I think one of the things I realized was a lot of people may have issues with their boss, but if they learn to take a step back, that boss could just be pushing them, trying to get them outside of their comfort zone versus sometimes they are just giving them task after task. But if you try to take a step back and put yourself in their shoes as a leader and as a person, both ways, you learn that really you don't know what's going on in their life. You don't know what that leader's dealing with. I mean, I've had projects that I was on where partners had deaths in the family and you couldn't even tell, and you have other situations where you knew everything was going on, and so it's managing that pendulum swing and not being totally stoic and non-emotional, but also not being an emotional nutcase, and nutcase is not the right word, but not being like totally frazzled where your team doesn't understand what's going on and what your vision is and unclear. So you've got to find that balance. And that's that point of joy of like, okay, here's where I'm taking a step back. I'm removing the emotion from it and really realigning to whatever the mission or vision is that I need to get done and reprioritizing everything on my plate.
And the reason I say that your business is new, a lot of people wouldn't take the risk of investing in a podcast when your business is so new.
Right.
They will probably be listening thinking, I need to start this when I'm like 2 years in, 3 years in. I'm not ready for the podcast, but I want one day.
Right.
So when you were evaluating the risk, what made you say now's the time?
So investing in myself. I have invested so much time and energy in everybody else and in my career. And I finally said, you know what? I believe in this vision and I believe in this mission. I want to be able to share these messages with leaders and I want it to get out there. And so part of it was, it was a leap of faith. But it also was just giving it a chance to invest in myself for once.
And I wanted to ask that because I actually started my podcast well before I began my business.
Okay.
And so the first season of my podcast, it was sporadic. I didn't really know what I was doing because I was just interviewing people that were interesting to me that I felt like I could essentially learn from. So my first podcast, it was called What Do You Do Exactly? And I would interview people on what do you do when you have to pivot from television news into something else?
Okay.
So I would podcast and interview them, learn, and share their stories. And I wrapped up that podcast and then I did another season. And that next season I called On Cam Ready. And I was like, okay, well, if people are going to pivot and they're realizing that they need to show up on camera, how? And I started to interview my network and say, well, what do we do?
Right.
That season was, I think I got like 30 episodes in. But again, it wasn't every week. It was every other week. Then it was once, it was sporadic.
Right.
And through that process, I started to realize I need to invest in the strategy portion of this type of launch. So I took time off.
Right.
And that's why my Unknown to Known episodes are now under a season 2 because I took time.
Right.
And I batch recorded like you did.
Right.
And I also tested out a solo podcast. So I have 2. One is a solo podcast and it's called Think Like a Producer. And that's where I just give media relations tips and I critique YouTube podcasts.
Okay.
And I decided to test it all out. Really, like as I was building my business.
Right.
My business was also me testing for a year or 2 before I decided this is it in 2026. It's like, this is it. And I'm committing to this versus being all over the place where I felt like in 2025.
Right.
So I believe that if you're deciding to make that pivot and you think you want to start showing up on camera because you want to attract clients or you want press or you want more, sometimes investing in the long form content can really start to help your wheels turn. I help you identify who your ideal client really is and start to build your authority before you need it. And I really think that if you're nurturing your purpose online and you're building your authority before you need people to know you for that authority, it can really help. So that's why I found it interesting that, you were rushing when we were talking.
Right.
You were like, I need the podcast. I'm like, oh my goodness.
Yes.
But I could relate because I felt the same way. Having been behind the scenes, I knew I needed to be on camera. I needed to push myself out of that comfort zone. So tell us about yours
Yeah,
journey.
I think part of it is, so there's a couple of things
Yeah.
there. I mean, that was a lot.
Uh-huh.
So I think ultimately part of it was everybody, all the coaches and strategists that are out there are like, just get out there and start doing it. But you also have to have a strategy and a plan. Coming from a risk and compliance background and from the global banks and consulting background that I have, I'm like, I think big picture. I'm like, we could, save world hunger with this podcast. I don't know, but
Yeah.
I am like, oh my gosh, I want to do big things. I had to learn how to slow down and scale it back with and thankfully I had enough of the good mentors and coaches and advisors saying, hey, Joy, like, let's take this one step at a time. Right. I've actually, I talked about it a little bit earlier, was like, they were telling me to do my solo podcast because getting guests is hard. Guests isn't hard for me. I've got 41 episodes. I've got a list of 200 people plus that want to get on the podcast or that I want to interview or whatever. So I've got like this long running list and I'm like, okay, how can I do 200 episodes? Can I get them like, do I do one a week, one a day? And like, people are like, no, you're going to overwhelm people. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to start looking at it and trying to adjust a little bit. So we're going to see how the podcast episodes, respond and people react to them. And then we'll adjust guests according to what, what they like there. But part of it is also, for me, it was I always think about like, the elite athletes, the top performers that are out there, they always hire coaches and athletes and stuff like that. When I struggled with my weight, I hired a personal trainer. I worked with I've always had coaches, and like, I joke around that everybody should go to therapy because my mom was a therapist and I was raised, with my parents' divorce, going to therapy since 13. And so now what I've learned is, yes, therapy is good for a lot and you can learn a lot of skills, but there's also coaches are there to help you fine tune yourself and get into certain areas. And so I felt like when the reason why I wanted to get into leadership coaching is really helping my clients have that safe space to be able to break down, to be able to slough off that skin. And, it's like, I've always told my counselees and my mentees and my clients to be vulnerable, to be authentic and be themselves. And what I realized was I've always been authentic and I just tell it like it is, but at the same time, what I wasn't realizing is I had learned so well to do the dance that when I thought I was being authentic, I wasn't. And so that was the hardest breakthrough. And when I was able to let down that guard and doing the podcast episodes, like recording it in this setting, it's given me, I've always needed somebody to show up for because maybe I didn't feel strong enough to show up for myself. And so I was like, well, I'm paying to do a podcast recording. I got to show up and I'm going to do this. And really the thing that launched me on it was after we had gone through and set up my framework, and I was trying to think about like, okay, how do I do my coaching? Do I do intensives? Do I do half days? Do I do monthly things? We were going through some of the pricing structure on that. I was like, I just want to get out there as Joy. And part of when I was at KPMG, like they wanted us on social media with and even in banking financial services, sharing the brand, sharing your moment and stuff like that. But it had to be compliant with the brand and the values and all of that. And it wasn't that it wasn't my authentic self, because I always did try to show up, but you always had the safety net of the big brand behind you, And so getting out there on my own was like, crap, like, am I still going to have the friends and the support that I would have if I'm at a KPMG, an HSBC, a Sallie Mae, an E-Trade, and even with all the women's leadership stuff that I did, I mean, EWF and Forward, I was always very involved in giving and giving and giving. But I was like, now that I'm going out on my own, are people going to support me the same way that I have supported so many other people? Because I've been telling people to support, lift, pour into others. But like, are they going to do it for me? And of course, I mean, everybody's showed up so far. It's been
And
great.
that's great. Yeah.
And so, but I think what I had to realize was too, it wasn't when I was so set on, other people pouring into me, I realized I had to pour into myself. And so while I'm like, okay, I'm going to pay for this so somebody could show up, I needed to show up for myself to show myself that I could do it on my own and not have the 4-letter brands behind me and things like that, because that was the biggest thing. And really being okay with, oh my gosh, if I go out there and share my story, what are my ex-colleagues going to think? What are my ex-bosses going to think? Are they going to think I'm crazy? Are they going to think, oh my God, what is she doing? And the truth is, it doesn't matter what they think. What matters is the people that I help and the people that I'm able to help level up, and I'm able to help overcome that self-doubt, that self-fear, and find that joyous edge. I'm able to help them overcome their overcommitment, and that is what is driving me more so than the haters and the people that I have to worry about being like, oh, well, they think she's whatever, I don't care about that anymore. I care about helping people, and that's my purpose.
I love that. And I will say this, when I launched mine, I never asked. I never asked for really support. And I think the fact that you've asked it, you've said to people like, I need you to help me,
right,
is something I didn't do. And I felt like I didn't have support. I didn't have the people on my entrepreneurial journey, which is why I started the Known Collective. It's like, I want to get more people in the room that are on that same journey, trying to become more known in a new niche. So I think it's great that you have that support. Everyone who's trying to podcast, you need that support. You also need to have the right equipment. And I'm wondering, what kind of mic did you go with?
I don't even remember. I think it's like a Geox. It's whatever my strategist said. He goes,
like,
I've got, what is it? It's the big, it's the
I don't know.
one.
Did you go with the Yeti? The blue?
Oh, it's blue and white.
Maybe
but it's
a blue
not,
Yeti.
I got it off Best Buy.
Okay.
So I don't know. I'll make sure you have it for the show notes.
Yes.
But like, but I tried like 10 different things, right? I definitely bought those DJI things that I see you walking with your camera and all of that. I was like, okay, I got to get that. But, I didn't, I went with what my strategist had.
Yeah.
I said, Brandon, what do you have? And I need that for my home thing. But part of that, like, so the reason why, and I'm fortunate and blessed enough to be able to afford to hire a studio and hire an editor to do that stuff, because I was so overwhelmed in all the other systems I'm trying to learn for my own business that I'm like, if you throw one more, like, I am a training junkie, like anybody, and I'm a feedback junkie. I'm like, give it to me raw. Like, I would love, my mid-year review, my year-end feedback. Oh yeah, Joy, do this, change this. I was at the point where I was like, I can't take any more feedback. I'm like, I'm just going to go with this. I'm like, Brandon, tell me what you have. I can't make another decision. I'm just going to get what you get. And I mean, they're actually pretty good. He's got these 2-panel things. I'll share them with you and let you know what they are. But the reason I did for my first episodes, for the majority of them in person, was because I was too scared to do the editing and all of that myself. Now, am I open to moving to more of a Riverside type interview, that'd be much easier, with having some people on. I think you lose this in-person connection.
You do.
And that's what I'm going to be struggling with is I want to interview the world, but I also want to have that in-person connection too. And so it's finding the balance between those.
It's important. And this is actually my first in-person recording. So I just want to, again, say thanks to Scoot Orbit for having us here. And, at the end of every show, I always ask people, if you had 30 seconds to introduce yourself, you're 30 seconds on TV, you're trying to tell your story, this is your 30-second bite, what would you say, Joy?
For my 30 seconds, I would say I'm here to bring joy back into people's life. And not in the cheesy, well, it is probably cheesy, but it's teaching people how to learn how to take a step back, do a full inventory of their life, act like Columbo and investigate and figure things out, figure out what your purpose is, and then really replan, reprioritize, and embrace the joy on the journey.
That sounds fun. And so after 41 episodes, do you have a favorite that brought you joy? Oh, don't reply because, guys, her episodes are rolling out. You can check out our podcast, The Joyous Edge, on your podcasting platform of choice as well as on YouTube. So check it out and find us both online. My daughter always says, don't say too much at the end. So just go to the notes and check out the next episode of Unknown to Known or Think Like a Producer. See, there I go again. My daughter's going to hate this. Don't worry. I'll see you online. Bye.